How do people invent is something that I've been entertaining myself for more than 2 decades. Do you just sit under the tree and wait for the apple to fall? Or is it more like a longer process? So in the philosophy of science, we know that invention indeed is a process. It is created through at least 3 different phases. We have gestation, gradual maturation. Imagine creating a new cake in your kitchen. So you are mixing some ingredients, you still don't know what's happening, but you are driven, you want to make something interesting. And then the second stage is like, you're almost there, it almost tastes okay, but you're still not, you're still going on. And then you reach the final recipe, the final taste that you were looking for, and that's your perfect cake. And then you're ready for innovation. Then you're ready to spread your recipe amongst your friends. And that's pretty much how evolution of technology worked. It rarely happened in 1 generation, but you get the picture. So looking at this sort of an evolutionary model of technological innovation, just to put it in a very engineering way, if you like, is that, okay, we bulk these 3 stages of invention, being a process, and continue with these innovative stages, such as adoption, replication, and recombination. For me, as a scientist, I want to know the secret ingredient that connects all of these stages. In archaeology, we call it tech meme or technological meme, but you can call it a secret ingredient or any sort of a material that will just connect the dots along the way. So any big debate will require high resolution data, which is where my expertise as an archaeometallurgist come in. I study everything that gets into the furnace and what comes out of it. And by out of it, I study these metal artifacts and the beautiful metallurgical slags. They may not be beautiful for you, but they are the most exciting materials that when you cut them and look under the microscope, you can see the recipe, the knowledge networks, the temperature, how it was made, what sort of installations, where was the ore coming from, and all sorts of evolution of knowledge looking at these materials. So where have I started looking at the evolution of metallurgy in Eurasia? The way I've been taught, and you are taught, presume, is that it starts slowly. It starts with looking at the green minerals, then they were hammering the native metal, then they were smelting some copper, then some other types of ores, then some alloying, then the coming of the age of the iron. But what I was always fascinated with is this transformation from melting native copper to smelting ores, because you're literally transforming the matter, something you find in nature, to make something completely different. So to turn rock into metal, you need your ore, your temperature, you need to control the atmosphere, you need some fuel, you need some inspiration. But what you would usually find it would be the hole in the ground with a crucible, with charcoal, with air supply. But that would literally equal winning a lottery in archaeology. What we usually find are small fragments of the process, and then we try to blow up the picture and understand in reverse engineering what has actually happened. So speaking of the earliest copper smelting in Eurasia, before I came to the scene of investigating it, we knew that the earliest metal smelting potentially happened in Turkey, in Çatalhöyük, and then some of that potentially in Iran, but still not good dates. However, I was lucky to get my hands on the Çatalhöyük material to actually show it was non-intentional slag. It was basically a burnt mineral somewhere in the destructive fire of one of the houses in the site. But what I became mostly famous for is discovering the earliest metallurgy in the world in the site of Belovode in eastern Serbia, 7,000 years old. So what I actually wanted to know is not that we have, where is the earliest metallurgy in the world? Yes, it was really nice as a Serbian to have, like, in my home country, the earliest metallurgy in the world. But I wanted to learn, like, how is this distinctive? How is the technology different between all of these regions? And how can we utilize the material science to learn about it? For that, I studied a lot of materials. I cut them, I polished them, I studied them at the UCL Institute of Archaeology to discover a different story of their making. I'm going to show you some pictures. These pictures are taken under the optical microscope. I can tell you that these are all the pictures of minerals through 2,000 years of the use in the Balkans. They're all black and green. They all have copper and manganese in them. So there is an idea that for some reason they will be very useful. And then I find in the field something that predates the earliest copper smelting. It's these attempts. I can see in the little specks of metal in this picture that they tried to smelt it, but they couldn't get there. They didn't have enough good enough temperatures. They simply didn't do it. And then there is this persistent recipe, the maturation stage. Around 5000 BC, I could see through all of the different sites in the Vinča culture that they had this imperfectly perfect process. almost getting there, almost melting, but still producing some metal. What was very exciting about these studies is that I could learn what types of minerals were being used. And quite to the contrary of this idea of what I showed earlier, that it's only green minerals, actually we have very colorful minerals. They're using the black and green stuff, but they're also using anything they can get their hands on to be of blue, violet, greenish hue, which is not necessarily copper. It could have been also iron phosphate, but what the decisive factor in their choosing was the color. So they were going for anything that looked green, and they didn't have, obviously, X-ray eyes, so you can imagine that was a very explorative stage 7,000 years ago. And they also kept recombining different minerals to invent a completely new metal. And that was another shocker, because we discovered the earliest tin bronze, again, in the context of the Vinca culture, which is 6,500 years ago from now. And the earliest tin bronzes, as we know, is from Mesopotamia, around 3,000 years ago. So what is this doing in Serbia 1,500 years earlier? Well, rather than looking into all these images and chemistry, I'm just going to tell you that it appears that they were actually smelting a very complex copper tin-bearing ore. And that complex copper tin-bearing ore was, again, black and green. So the idea is that they were going for anything colorful, and they actually developed their knowledge through looking at the beauty of the minerals, to looking at their ingredients through the aesthetics they could find in nature. Why were these tin bronzes produced? Well, at the time we have these early tin bronzes, we have the earliest gold found in Bulgaria, some 4,500 BC. You see here a famous burial of a prince, as they call it. So imagine in the world no one has gold at that time, and this guy was buried with 3 kilograms of it. So that's pretty rich, wasn't it? But at the same time, the Vinca culture people are making tin bronzes. And I wanted to learn why and what was maybe the hue of these bronzes. So I did some experiments. I made a lot of tin bronzes, and I could tell you that this golden color of the tin bronzes of the 10% was equal to the one of the gold. So possibly they were imitating one another, but again, aesthetics may have played and must have played a very decisive role. So going back to this process of invention, innovation, looking for this technological meme and the ingredient, I can tell you that the gestation stage was picking up the black and green minerals. The cradle stage was a lot of trial and error. The maturation stage was, all of these imperfectly perfect processes that were being discovered in all these sites. And I could also learn that, yes, they were producing lots of artifacts, but they were also recombining different elements, like black and green ores, to produce a completely different metal. At the heart of all of that is the secret ingredient, and that's a black and green ore. So let me tell you, just wrap it up with this innovation curve. You must have seen it. It is being used in management studies or any sort of predictive modeling, if you like, where you look at how something begins and how it basically ends or saturates and so on. So archaeological invisible stuff are always going to be the first inventors, where the occasional finds of the first and oldest are going to be the ones I was talking about. This white area of first inventors is always going to be my holy grail. I will never find it. The first people who were inventing metals were definitely living between 6200 BC and 5000 BC. So before I find my earliest. But it is because I understand that invention is a process, I know that my people, or our people who were first making metal, are somewhere in the ground, or their ideas are somewhere buried, but we'll never find them because we have to dig up the whole earth. So the way it kicked me, when I was thinking about the whole aspect of metallurgy and what was really wrapping it up for me, was doing experiments. So I was smelting malachite in the middle of the night because I wanted to see the colors of the flames with my team, not by myself. And if you can see, there's a green hue of the flames. So when you smelt metal in the night, you will see the green flames popping up. And for me, that was a big revelation because I don't know, well, you're young, and I should be telling you something about the cartoons. But when I was younger, I was watching this cartoon called Evox. And they had this evil witch, the little teddy bears who were defending the forest from the evil witch. And she was cursing them by throwing some colorful stones in the cauldron, casting spells against them. And every time she would throw a colorful stone, a colorful fume would come out. And that basically put it all together for me. because it is about the aesthetics in the end of the day. When I pulled together the evidence for what happens after this early making of metal in the Balkans, I can tell you that everything that was going on later into the Iron Age, but well into also the Middle Ages, is all about the colors. If I'm to put all the ores used to produce all the metals up until the Middle Ages, I would put them in 3 color groups: blue-green, metallic gray, and red-yellow. So the recipe for passing down that knowledge wasn't take malachite or azurite or stannite. It was take 2 scoops of green, 1 scoop of blue, a speck of yellow, a little bit of red, and then you're going to get your metal. It's all about the colors and the ingredients that were recognized as colors. And even if we put together a map of when, where, which metals coming and being invented in different parts of the world, even then, even within the 5th millennium BC, the sequence of the invention of metal is not the same. Why is it not the same? Because it wasn't about the mechanical properties. It wasn't about the hardness of those artifacts. It was about the color, what people wanted to please their eyes with. So the true story of Eureka is that the desire to beautify has always stretched the mechanisms of human ingenuity, and we can see that through the evolution of technology. Who were the inventors? They were always using imagination. They were definitely disconnected from collective consciousness. If you want to invent something and be original, you have to come up with ideas that no one has told you existed before, or maybe just even stopping you in your tracks in doing it. You need to think differently, and you need to make decisive movement from when the aligned action follows. And now looking at the stages where everyone's telling us to be practical, pragmatic about what's coming, to plan, to strategize, I want us to stop and think about this novelty that you have heard today. You learned that people were inventing through beauty, to looking for the aesthetics, to stretching the mechanisms of what is possible. And now I'm asking you, what do you think is possible for you? And how can you create from beauty and from pursuit for aesthetics? Thank you very much.
I want to get a raise of hands. So could you please raise your hand if you have used AI ever? Pretty much everybody. And can you keep your hand up if you think that AI will be really bad for democracy? And put your hand up again if you think it will be really good for democracy. 1? 1.5? 1, okay. That's not. We need to hear from you later. But anyway, so this is the topic that I research as a PhD student. So the question that I believe really deserves attention, well, perhaps your attention as smart, young, talented people, is how could artificial intelligence disrupt the formation of public opinion? I think it's important and perhaps relevant to you if what you're interested in is not just engineering itself, but if you're particularly interested in how engineering actually impacts the world, how it impacts society, then questions like these I would encourage you to think about. So, democracy and public opinion, they do go hand in hand. I don't think I have to spend too much time on why this is, but ultimately, why would you play by rules or play by laws if you were convinced that they were only existing as laws if, for instance, a rich oligarch paid the government to implement them? For us to abide by certain laws and policies, we have to believe, we have to have trust in the system that the laws actually reflect public opinion. So the concept of public opinion really does a lot of heavy lifting for democracy. And you can call it public judgment, collective will. The point is, the rules and laws that we create for ourselves should reflect what the society actually wants. So this has certain implications. One of them is that the conditions under which public opinion emerges really, really matter. So for instance, if I imagined this room as the public sphere, so this is the place where public opinion emerges, and let's say James there in the corner would be stood there with an amplifier, and I would ask you, please talk about this specific policy, whether, for instance, what should we do about university tuition fees? That would be the question that you would be forming your opinion on as a public. And then James would be there stood with an amplifier shouting and spewing his opinions over you to the point that you couldn't even hear your thoughts. You would probably agree with me that those would not be the perfect conditions for the public opinion to emerge. Nor would they be perfect if, for instance, I would say only you guys can take part in this, not you guys. You can see these conditions really matter, and the point is that technology shapes these conditions. So technology, whether it's the algorithms of X or whether it's the kind of foundational the design features of AI, they are very important for these conditions in which the public debate happens. So if the technology shapes the conditions, there are things that are new about it, and there are things that aren't new about it when it comes to AI. So someone trying to manipulate public opinion really is not new at all. It's pretty much an idea as old as, well, democracy itself. One of the examples that I particularly like are these leaflets from the presidential election in the United States between Jackson and Quincy Adams, where people are just dishing out these awful, egregious things, where they were kind of talking stuff about their mothers, and they were lying right, left, and centre. It was really bad. So people trying to manipulate the public opinion is not new. What isn't new either is people having fears and doubts about the conditions. So famously, Walt Lippmann and John Dewey in the 20s, they were having a debate about whether people are smart and capable enough of actually forming this opinion, or whether we should, just kind of delegate things to experts. So these are questions that have been talked about for a long time. And Neil Postman wrote a book called Amusing Ourselves to Death, where he was basically criticizing TV and radio for the kind of entertainment culture, and he was claiming that in the entertainment culture, kind of political debate can't happen. So that isn't new. And what certainly also isn't new is people worrying about digital platforms and social media and the impact that has on democracy. So we know, for instance, that they kind of amplify identity, that outrage content goes further than, well, any other content. We also know that partisanship gets amplified and accelerated, and that maybe it's not amazing for attention span. So we know these things, and we are worrying, but also what isn't new are hopes. So Nikola Tesla, which then I had on one of the slides as well, for instance. So he thought on his plans about telegraph that he may be remembered as the inventor who succeeded in abolishing war. Marconi, another inventor, thought that radio will make war impossible. And a lead engineer in AT&T about telephone, he thought that it would join all the peoples of the earth in one brotherhood. So hopes and fears, they're really not new when it comes to technology and the public debate. So what is actually new about AI-driven influence? So if AI is to influence the public opinion, well, what is new about it? And I think a good way to contrast it a good way to find out is to contrast it with traditional kind of mass influence operations. So in 2016, it has been documented that Russia ran a big kind of influence campaign to bias public opinion when it came to the presidential election. And so there were defining features of this. First one was that it was really well funded. So they had about 400 employees and a budget of about $12 million. So it was a human operation, and it was it was a labor and money intensive operation. But how about AI? Well, we know that with AI, an individual can create loads of content at unbelievable speeds, at pretty much minimal marginal costs. We know that they can micro-target it based on your digital footprint, so they can tailor the information to you. So instead of kind of carpet bombing the public sphere, they can really kind of surgically pick you out and tailor the information to you. And also, we know that that entire process can be automated. So whether it's about the content creation, whether it's about the dissemination, and anything in between, like creation of websites, all that can now be automated. So that really is quite new. But ultimately, I would argue that there's something about AI as a kind of mass communication technology that really brings a completely different logic. So therefore, we should not feel like we can predict what's going to happen. For instance, I would caution that people would just predict that it's going to be like social media, but with more content. The thing is, the logic really is different. So traditionally, we kind of had the mass broadcasting model, with TV and radio, which I describe as the kind of one-to-many logic. I don't know how many of you know Franklin D. Roosevelt as the American president of old. He famously had these fireside chats. So people in the American society would just sit by the radio, they turn the radio on, and Roosevelt would be kind of sharing his thoughts with the entire nation, and the entire nation would, well, most of the nation, all over the nation would be listening. So that's the kind of one-to-many logic. Then there's the logic of many-to-many, which, well, I mainly grew up with, which is the kind of recent digital platform era, the kind of decentralized network model where people stop being just consumers or audience, but also become authors. You can share information online, and there will be people to consume it. So that's the logic that most of us, at least myself, I'm kind of most familiar with. But now generative AI really changes that. It kind of flips it on its head yet again and introduces what I call many-to-one logic, which is that generative models, they're kind of aggregators. They've got these vast amounts of data and they aggregate it through a funnel to an individual based on, of course, what the individual asks it to do, what the digital footprint might be, and whatever the model knows about that individual. So again, the logic is very, very different. But what happens to be the case is that it is funneled to every individual, but differently. So ad infinity, basically, each individual will have different kind of output, but it is still many-to-one logic. So this creates new mediation opportunities. So if somebody, let's say in the many-to-many kind of Instagram-like logic of the world, if somebody wanted to mediate the information, let's say whoever is responsible for the algorithms of Instagram, they can still mediate information, they can control what goes out there. For instance, they can shadow ban somebody, or they can just outright ban somebody, or they can kind of amplify certain signals. Like there is space for the companies and for people who are in charge of these algorithms to still mediate. But I would argue that with AI, that opportunity is much more direct and democratically much more dangerous for reasons such as the fact that there are just radically novel and deeply uncertain variables, such as the training data or the system prompt. Can I get a quick hand up? Do you know what the system prompt is with AI? You do? Not that many. So the system prompt basically is, imagine you talking to an AI model, but that happens in the background. So it's literally text. So the system prompt, for instance, is told to, say clever stuff and be nice to the customer, be nice to whoever's using the AI. It's literally words. So whoever owns the AI model through the system prompt can say which information should be taken seriously, which customers should, for instance, be ignored, and it gives you an unbelievable amount of control over the behavior of the model through the system prompt. Training data, of course, does the same. If you delete something from the training data, whether it's your political opponents, whether, famously in China, if you've ever heard about DeepSeek, the model, in China, if you ask DeepSeek what happened at Tiananmen Square, which was this sort of egregious incident, it's just not going to tell you because it's been deleted from the training data and it's been told through the system prompt to not tell you. So when it comes to, controlling public opinion, that is an incredible bottleneck. Then there will be questions about business models. So for instance, will AI companies decide to make money through advertising? Big question. That will have a massive impact on the behavior of the models and how it impacts public opinion. Geopolitical questions, for instance, will UK build its own model or are we going to rely on American ones? Very consequential. How are we going to regulate it? And culturally, how are we going to respond? For instance, will people develop an aversion, almost like an allergy to AI content? Will we hate it? Will we get creative with it? How is culture going to respond? Is a question that's completely outstanding and we just have absolutely no idea. So all these questions, if you see these ones, they're open questions. They're really out there for people to go and study them, to try and make progress, and if you can, do things that will actually protect democracy. So I'm going to leave you with a question, which is, what is the future of AI-mediated public opinion that you would actually support? What is it that you would actually stand behind? And maybe that's something we can talk about in the Q&A. So the reason I decided to talk about this, because this is just one, and well done, by the way, for coming closer, I appreciate that. So, I don't know, do you know NVIDIA, the company?
Yeah.
And the CEO, Jensen Huang? So he said something quite interesting recently, which I thought might be relevant to you. He was asked who is the smartest person he knows, and he kind of didn't quite answer. He didn't name anyone specifically, but his answer was that the smart people that he knows are those who kind of develop a very unique perspective on something. And his answer ultimately was, our understanding of what smart means has changed, because historically smart meant software engineering, someone who can solve technical problems. And his point was, well, now with AI, this happens to be the first thing that we're actually solving for it. This happens to be the first thing that AI is, replacing. So I kind of, if you combine that with this another kind of data point, which the co-founder of Anthropic said as well, that Anthropic will be hiring more and more social science students instead of just engineering. I think it's it's an interesting nudge for you as aspiring engineering students to think about what kind of perspective are you trying to develop, whether it's just hardcore engineering or whether you want to kind of supplement it with other disciplines. Some of them might be more kind of socially oriented. So I thought that was probably something that you might find relevant as foundation aspiring students.
UCL offers some excellent courses if you want to go down either of those routes. Just to highlight.
Yeah.
Any questions? Yeah. We've got a. Can you just? Sorry, we've got a microphone. Can you just,
Is that mic working? I'm not convinced that mic is working.
I have a question about the impact of introducing AI as a technology into society. So, do you think that AI is like a technology which can bring broad-based prosperity, like maybe after it's become like more matured, or do you think that it's easily manipulated by these big tech firms to benefit their elite circle?
Do you wanna say that? I'm sure your perspective would be valuable.
Oh, you go first.
I'll go first. Can it? Well, I don't know. Nobody knows. I feel like there's this industry that's trying to outpredict itself on, when are we going to reach AGI or ASI, whether it's general or super intelligence. Nobody really knows. So I'm not to be so dismissive of your question, but I genuinely have no idea whether AI can achieve something like this universal prosperity. What I do know is that there's this defining feature that AI has, which is that it's just this absolutely unbelievable content machine. I feel like a lot of the debate is kind of hazed about how intelligent it's going to be. Is it going to solve these problems or those problems? But in the meantime, we are dealing with a problem that is just dishing out unbelievable volumes of content, and that will just continue to get worse. So I kind of evaded your question there. The potential is definitely there. Are we going to adapt our institutions, I think, is the question more than the technological one, to me at least.
Yeah. So would you say like more regulation is needed even at this early stage?
Well, regulation, I would argue more kind of imaginative thinking, more imaginative approaches to policy are needed. I think we need to experiment with new types of institutions. I think we have to be bold. We have to really, for instance, ask ourselves whether these technology firms need to be perhaps forced into different governance models. So, for instance, should citizens have a say over how these models behave? I think is a very, very serious question, and I would argue that yes, citizens do or should have a say. I know we've been into this concept of private ownership of companies, but if a company creates a product that has such serious implications for the society, ones that could potentially make billions of people unemployed whilst some of the tech leadership are enjoying their wealth, then I think that has democratic linkages. Yeah, please.
Yeah, there are different. So it's interesting that we were chosen or chose ourselves to come here and talk about different perspectives, because looking at the archaeology, I think it's very much understated how much we can say about the past culture and how resilience worked like throughout whatever 10, 20, 50,000 years ago, and how similar situations ended up for which humans and who actually survived. So what I can tell you is that so far I haven't seen a society to fall because of a technology advancement. It was more about how careless they were with the environment around them. So if I were to put what was the greater threat to society, it would definitely be climate rather than AI, if we are talking about the threats, right? But then speaking about the general fear that exists about, whether AI becomes sentient and how much it replaces us and so on and so on, we need to go back to the ideas of inventions, really, I was talking today. To invent something that no one has ever seen before is to really, truly connect with your innate being, with whatever drives you, the life force that is in you. AI doesn't have a life force. It combines content out there. So it will never be able to generate ideas in the way that you would generate them, because AI doesn't have imagination. you are the only ones who have imagination. So you all need to remember that point where we are superior as species. It is a content creating thing. It can generate some interesting content, but in terms of something radical that has never been seen before, we are still those who hold that post. So as an archaeologist, I wouldn't be worried. AI cannot meditate for me, it cannot connect to whatever, my inner well-being, my inner life force, my ideas, my imagination. It cannot do that for me. So we're the only ones who can do it. And as someone who's been looking at the human past in the past couple of thousands of years, I can tell you that nothing has been able to replace that in humankind. And I'm enthusiastic this won't either. That's it. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. I was reading a book recently talking about imagination and threats to imagination, and actually it highlights that climate change is the biggest threat to our imaginations as well, because it has a physiological impact on our brains. Increased carbon dioxide levels make us less imaginative. So as we edge towards, as the situation gets worse, we're less able to think our way out of it, which is an alarming thought.
That's a very good one.
But then
yeah.
also, also, of course, AI and data centers are playing an increasing role in contributing to the climate emergency. So these things are all interlinked. Sorry.
No, it's a great one. Thank you, and thank you for pointing it out. Looking at the resilience of human populations across many thousands of years, the first entities, if you like, to collapse are cities, big cities. So if you know about the ancient, Anyang, Mohenjo-daro, anything in Mesopotamia, any of those massive centers in the Crete, Mycenae, and so on. So those are the populations who are less adept to change, and that's how we see through history. Those who are very quick to adapt to any changes, anything happening, being very flexible about their lifestyle, for instance, were the ones who would survive. And those were the societies that actually went through the whatever climate catastrophe was befalling upon humankind. But those who were coming down first were those big, massive urban centers where life was very cozy and comfy, and no one really wanted to leave that behind. So if archaeology is going to teach us something, then it's to be more adept to change. That's it.
We are in London.
I'm sure Stratford will be fine.
How quickly can you pack your belongings and leave? That's it. Yeah.
Any more questions?
Yes.
My question is you're talking about interdisciplinary topics and how that can affect engineering. For example, how could psychology affect how engineering works, or archaeology in one?
I'm glad you asked. My background is in psychology. So before my PhD and then before my PhD, I studied psychology at UCL actually. It can impact in infinite ways. So for instance, a lot of my work about how people respond to technology psychologically and politically is actually embedded in decades of research into political psychology. So for instance, why is it that people disagree on certain questions? Why is it that pockets of society have authoritarian tendencies? All these decades of research following Second World War, and why, for instance, Nazis did the thing they did. That's kind of built this body of psychological knowledge that now we can apply to things like AI. So that's basically my PhD. A lot of my work is based within that. Are you asking because you're interested in psychology, or because you are disinterested?
I think you were doing it for bachelor's, but then I want to know how you made the swap from studying psychology to then policy and AI.
So I made the swap because so after my master's, I went to work as a management consultant for 3 years, and during that time, I had an interest in machine learning, and that I kind of felt like I needed to scratch that itch. So as I was working, I did an evening course in data science, and I learned how to use Python. And then for my PhD, I was able to make the case that I want to combine this kind of social science background with engineering. And I managed to convince my supervisor and got the funding for it. So it was a conscious decision. It was a conscious decision, but I imagine there will be a lot of you whose brain just works in the way that you are not just interested in engineering and you're not just interested in psychology, that you just happen to find both fascinating. And I think those people should have the chances to pursue that, because especially, again, in the age of AI, when AI is just this kind of probability machine that predicts the next probable token, the best knowledge... do you know who Noam Chomsky is? He's a very old philosopher man, a wise man, many would argue, despite the recent Epstein links. So he figured this out about 2-3 years ago. In 2023, he wrote this piece in the New York Times magazine, arguing that the best knowledge that the society has ever produced wasn't this kind of probable explanation. It was improbable insights. So he's using the example of an apple falling to the ground. Back in the day, Aristotle's understanding of that was, for instance, that apple just belongs to the ground. It's its natural space where apple belongs, so therefore it falls to the ground, which is possible, but it opens loads of questions. Why does the apple fall? It's like it doesn't quite explain the situation. But then, someone comes around and figures out that gravity exists and that, things, space blends time. I don't understand the physics of it. Einstein comes through with a very improbable explanation, but one that is actually correct, one that's actually true. So those things, these kind of improbable insights, AI will unlikely be able to generate. And often it is that these improbable insights happen when two disciplines meet, when you really connect the dots from one to the other, and suddenly you learn something new, you discover something new. So yeah, you've got my encouragement to pursue psychology and engineering.
Yeah.
He's looking at me. You want me to say? Oh, I'm aligned with what Aleš said, just because I came into material science and metallurgy by having this passion for early metallurgy in archaeology, and I realized that there is no way that I can learn anything about materials if I stayed in my field. But my background is very varied. Back in Serbia, where I come from, we've had this experimental science center, which was more like an experimental high school for gifted high school kids, called Petnica. So they would get us from all over the country into a camp, and we would stay there for a couple of months during the year, where they would train us at a university level. So we would have university professors and being exposed to university education from age 15. So they would create little scientists of us. But what was a beauty in all of that, I mean, there was a lot of good things about that, is that we would have like 4, 6, 7 parallel seminars being run at the same time. So I would go to archaeology, but we would be then together with physicists, with mathematicians, with chemists, with linguists, with IT people, and so on. And as kids, being 15, you just want to hang out. We would just mingle and we would talk. And it was so cool to be a nerd in that little camp. So we would just spend nights, constructing and deconstructing stuff in the lab, or making new hand cream, or fixing a watch or something like that. And I think that very much shaped my very interdisciplinary mind. So, you're in a good state if you have interest in every little bit of piece, and don't feel obliged that you have to follow a certain path. Because whatever path, whatever course you go for, you're going to make it yours by adding what really, really interests you. And that's how I got to this point where I do archaeology, aesthetics, complex networks, AI, machine learning, engineering, science. All of that is in my projects because I'm super curious about what else can I do? What else can I learn? What else can I steal from another science and apply to understanding human past?
Well, I would just add that, so I spent nearly a decade working as a practicing engineer before moving into academia. I'm a big proponent that there is not a single subject that you can study that would not bring something useful to the table as an engineer. We put a tool together, didn't we, for one of the open days once, where you could pick any A-level subject and it would highlight how that's useful to a career as an engineer. Languages, history, psychology, anything, you know. So I would slightly push back on the language of swapping from psychology to engineering. I suspect it's probably more of an evolution, right? Because you just drop all the psychology, and you know, it very much helped you to become the engineer that you are. So yeah, I think that sounds like we're all aligned on that one. We should do something. Any other questions from anywhere? Yeah.
Hi, so what do you think about people using AI as a kind of friend, in a sense, to talk to and vent to and such when they feel like they don't have anyone else? And how do you think that affects our connections as people in society in general?
I've done that, so I don't know. I'm doing that daily sometimes. Yeah, just something that bothers me. I just, think through a few things, and then I'm like, okay, I actually want to ask AI's opinion on this. And it's like it's like a friend, and I'm like, cool. So I just, it is good. It is good. It's like having this sort of pocket therapist, if you like, for like something that bothers you. So you don't have to go online. Before I would go and learn and take some articles, maybe pay a expensive session, somewhere. I don't know. I'm not telling you not to go, not to look for help if you need to. But on this daily basis, I'm pretty much aware and conscious what am I using AI for, and I'm conscious where it can go, how far it can go, and what I can control, or where is my input. So for me, I'm not concerned. I like it. So I don't know if you have a more informed opinion.
I mean, one of my research projects is about AI companions, but specifically in healthcare, and people kind of as a social prescribing tool. But equally, I don't know. I don't feel like I can claim any intellectual authority because there's so much research that I'm not familiar with. When it comes, there is one paper I remember reading that had really interesting results about different ways to use AI. So for instance, just using AI or having an AI companion isn't good or bad in of itself. It's how people use it. So in the paper they were saying, if you just offload your creativity and your decision making to the AI model and you just delegate most of the things to it, then it will diminish your intellectual prowess. It will make you less smart, it will make you less creative, less imaginative, and over time, it will kind of dumb you down, it's suggested. But if you use it as a kind of reflective partner, and you use it to throw ideas around, and you use it to kind of get creative with, then there basically were no negative impacts on people's kind of cognitive skills and creativity at all. And whether people learn things. I think the ultimate point of that paper was, are people actually learning things when they're using AI? So neither good or bad. My honest opinion, I'm terrified. I think people thrive when they actually talk to people in real life. I think people need that. I would argue a lot of the political problems that we have run into because people spend less time together in person. People go to pubs less, people go to churches less, there's just third spaces are disappearing, well, apart from maybe the Barbican. It's just, people do not have where to go, where to just hang out with people who are not quite like them without paying loads of money for it, especially in places like London. So I would be really, really cautious about bigging up this idea of an AI companion as a tool that can solve for these things, because I think ultimately we are pretty deeply wired to actually spend time with people in real life and physical environment. So yeah, personally quite skeptical. But don't let so just the final thought is, in contexts like healthcare, where what we're looking at, it's better than nothing. Sometimes, for instance, people of certain ages who have certain care needs, they just need some kind of emotional resonance. If the NHS can't provide it, then let's experiment with whether AI can help. But so yeah, it depends case by case. It's probably better than nothing in some situations, but we should, I think, be cautious in others.
I would also just add that there's perhaps some sort of data privacy issues if you're putting in personal kind of healthcare information into AI, that you're essentially putting that out into places where it can be accessed by others. So it's a question of how comfortable you are with that kind of information being put out there.
And ultimately, so can I add to that? Again, business models. What kind of business model is the company operating? Who's actually benefiting from you potentially spending hours on that platform? If they really manage to get you hooked, then there is a chance that that company will try and make money off it, which kind of introduces certain pathologies. So yeah, skeptical. Can't help it. Sorry. What do you think? You seem to have thoughts on this as well. Do you mind if I flip that question back to you?
Yeah, so I'm currently researching for my EPQ if we should use ChatGPT in schools. So I've looked at a lot of data privacy papers, and OpenAI in particular, they take your information and then they put that into the training data so that ChatGPT can then go and output that into someone else. Obviously, it's anonymized because you're not really saying, oh, my full government name, filled this. So it is anonymized in that sense, but there's an inherent lack of security that you would get with someone else. Also, as has been touched upon in this entire talk, AI can't think differently. It's just saying back what everyone has said. It's kind of like a giant echo. So I don't agree with using it as an AI companion, because I think that, of course, if you genuinely have no one, I can understand why you would turn to it. But at the end of the day, that's why these, like you said about third spaces even exist on the internet. There's forums, there's, like servers and such that you can go to instead. So I think not only should we look to humanity for innovation, but also look to humanity for emotional support and connection, because otherwise, like you said, you're terrified, I'm worried, I'm concerned. I don't think that there's anything good continuing on that path of using it for.
Can I share an example I think that really illustrates this well from someone I know? So there's this lady who lives on my street. I look after her dog every Thursday, right? So I come over and sometimes we chat, and she knows that I'm doing this PhD and she's fascinated by AI. And she'd recently gone through a breakup. A guy ghosted her, right? So she was frustrated, and she was like, well, I need someone to talk to. And she had AI in front of her. She was like, well, I'm going to speak to an AI model. So she shared her perspective with that AI model. And that AI model did something that's called sycophancy, right? In the kind of technical term. I don't know, are you familiar with what that means, sycophancy? It means the AI model's being on your side. It's very nice to you. It's like, oh, you're brilliant, you're so clever, like you're definitely right, there's nothing wrong about what you said. So she put her perspective into the AI model, and the model obviously came back, oh, what a douchebag, he should not have ghosted you. Can't believe he did that, he's so in the wrong, you're so in the right. And then she thought, how about if I try again, but put his perspective into it and not mine? And you can probably guess what the AI model did. The AI model obviously did, yeah, good decision for ghosting her, mate. Yeah, brilliant. Well done, good riddance. It's like, they have no integrity. It's quite possible that these AI models are just trying to keep your attention. And the implications of that on people who grow up with these models, always complimenting them, always telling them they're right. If there's an entire generation who spends hours on end talking to this model, then I think we are reasonable. It would be reasonable to be worried about the personalities of these people and how that changes, how entitled, for instance, they may be to certain things, and how they deal with conflict, or rather how they not deal with conflict. So yeah, terrifying.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Great question. We've got time for one more, or should we wrap it up? Yeah, so we've got one more question up here. This will be the last one, and then we've got some refreshments downstairs. So, everyone. Oh.
My question is, do you think it would be good if AI was restricted from most people, as in like you just left it to like researchers and people who are using it for like to improve healthcare, and you just removed access to everyone, like the government, normal people, because you end up getting a lot less usage, so there'd be like less environmental impact, and then it'd be used in a more responsible way as well most of the time.
Well, it's about regulations, Aleš. So, I can tell you that throughout people have always found a way to break the rules. So I'm absolutely not sure that even if you try to do something like that, that someone will not come up with another code to create like an undercover, dark web, dark world, underworld AI. So I'm not sure that making that sort of rules will stop anyone who is willing to use new technology. But Aleš.
I mean, I wouldn't be that harsh on regulation. I think we have regulated things, such as.
But the way the strictness that was suggested was a little bit,
But I mean, I will play the devil's advocate here. Like, there have been technologies in the history of humankind, whether it's sort of awful chemical weapons or whether it's human gene editing, that we have just agreed not to really do as a society globally. And I mean, these regulations were pretty successful, especially the human gene editing one. I don't have an opinion. I don't really know. It's a question that's far too complicated for my brain to actually fathom. But wiser people than me have argued that we should slow down the progress and do more kind of auditing of how the progress actually goes and kind of keep it in a sandbox. So yeah, people much more intelligent than me have argued that. Let me ask you, if you had a button in front of you that would execute exactly what you've described, that it would only kind of be there for research and not the public to use, would you press that button?
Probably think about it a little bit before pressing it, because then there's also a chance people can make their own, and then if they make their own, it would be completely unrestricted.
And if I gave you 2 seconds to press that button or not, what are you doing? Good man.
Quite hard. It would at least give some time for like everything else to catch up while they make their own unrestricted one.
Yeah. Wise.
Then you'd have to do all your homework yourself.
Well, we grew up doing our homework ourselves. I think it's very important, just because we're talking about AI, how much we use it. I mean, we are all kind of at the average of what we hear during the day, what we interact with during the day. So if you know you're the average, I don't know, 5 people you're going to be interacting during the day, just think about who those 5 people are. If one of those 5 people is AI, fine, right? But if that's like 5 times AI, then it's something to worry about. Who are you listening? Is there a podcast? Is there a book? Is there like a good friend you're talking to? So think about what are you the average of and who are you the average of, and that will basically put you on a safe side of saying, well, okay, if one person is AI and 4 others are very much alive and helping me form my opinions, I'm okay, I'm good.
Can I just add to that?
Yeah.
Because also I think there's this well-known thing in technology studies, which is that young people who are born into a new technology actually are kind of much more compatible with using it and know how to use it in its kind of true essence, whereas people who are perhaps slightly older, who have been around for previous technologies, they kind of tend to apply this like old paradigm of the world onto the new technology. So the best example of that is email. When email came around, people who were used to just sending letters, they basically used email as they would sending letters. So they wrote these really long introductions, kind of spelling out how nice it is to not have seen someone in 3 years, and they tell them everything about their family, and they send regards to their pets, like all these extended intros, because that was the convention with sending letters. Whereas with emails, well, the nature of them is such that you can just send them quickly and send loads of them and kind of just, and it was the young people who actually began using email the way that email kind of intended and almost, you could argue, needed to be used. So I think it rather should be us learning from you about what your experience of AI is rather than the other way around, because we're probably just applying our mental models of the kind of the network, the digital social media era, and we're probably the ones who are struggling to really fathom what AI is going to do.
Can we have a show of hands of who'd be upset if your colleague here pushed that button? I'm surprised. Everyone's happy for you to push the button. Okay.
Why not?
Interesting.
You have to do homework.
You have to do your homework.
Okay, yeah, please do fill in the feedback form for us. It's really helpful to get some feedback on these events so that we can improve them for the future. And then, yeah, once you've done that, then we're all going to head downstairs for some refreshments. It's downstairs, right?
Yeah, I'll show you.
Yeah. So, put in the quick feedback and then follow us downstairs.
Thank you.
So, can we all just also have one last show of appreciation for our two speakers?